Eleanor Vance looked at her daughter's fiancé, Liam, with a carefully constructed expression of pity. She saw a broken man, a liability whose light had been extinguished. She saw the fraying cuff of his shirt, the tired slump of his shoulders, the way his gaze drifted to the middle distance, as if searching for a future that had vanished. He was a weight, a stone tied to her daughter Chloe's ankle, threatening to drag her down from the glittering social strata Eleanor had spent a lifetime climbing. She didn't know that in the worn leather portfolio resting against his chair, a simple, unassuming object he now carried everywhere, like a talisman of his failure, were documents that could buy her entire world 3 times over. Within a month, the pity she felt now would curdle into a desperate, pleading terror. The empire she commanded would become a ruin, and the broken man she so casually dismissed would be the one holding the hammer. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this story. We're so glad to have you here. If you enjoy stories about hidden strength and seeing arrogance get its just desserts, we think you're going to love this one. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's get back to that dinner and the beginning of the end for the Vance family. The test had begun 3 weeks prior, on a Tuesday that smelled of rain and defeat. Liam had come home from his architectural firm, set his keys on the hall table of the pristine apartment he shared with Chloe, and delivered the news with a practiced, hollow tone. "They're downsizing," he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. "My entire department. It's over." He had rehearsed the words, the slump of his posture, the vacant look in his eyes. He had spent weeks studying the subtle tells of despair, not to mimic them, but to build a fortress of falsehood so convincing that no one would dare question it. Chloe had been perfect at first. She had wrapped him in her arms, her scent of expensive perfume and genuine shock filling his senses. "Oh my God, Liam, I'm so sorry. It's okay. We'll be okay." Her words were a balm, and for a fleeting, hopeful moment, he allowed himself to believe the test was unnecessary. He felt a pang of guilt for the intricate deception he was about to weave. He loved her, or at least, he desperately wanted the version of her he loved to be the real one. But a seed of doubt, planted long ago by 100 tiny cuts, had taken root. It was the way her mother's eyes would scan his suit before her gaze met his. The way her father, Robert, would ask about his firm's quarterly earnings with the detached air of an auditor. The way Chloe herself would sometimes fall silent when her friends asked what Liam did, as if architect was an insufficient answer. He wasn't a banker. He wasn't an heir. He was a creator, a man who built things from dreams and steel, and in their world, that felt somehow quaint. He needed to know if the foundation of their love was built on the bedrock of his character or on the shifting sands of his success. So he steeled himself and let the lie unfold. Now at the Vance family's weekly Sunday dinner, the lie was taking on a life of its own. The dining room was a monument to ostentatious wealth. A cavernous ceiling, a crystal chandelier that dripped light onto a polished mahogany table long enough to host a state dinner. Robert Vance sat at the head, a portly man whose face was a permanent mask of shrewd appraisal. Eleanor sat opposite, elegant and sharp as one of the diamond earrings she wore. And in the middle, caught between her parents' gravitational pull and Liam's new, dense silence, was Chloe. "I was talking to Cynthia Ashworth today," Eleanor began, her voice smooth as silk but laced with steel. She dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin. "Her son-in-law, you remember him, Chloe, the one from Sterling and Finch? He just made partner. They're buying a house in the Hamptons." She didn't look at Liam, but the statement was a missile launched directly at him. Everyone at the table knew. Liam continued to methodically cut his filet mignon, the knife making a faint, rhythmic scrape against the porcelain. He didn't react. He had conditioned himself for this. Patience was a blueprint. he would follow it. "That's nice, Mom," Chloe said, a little too quickly. She shot a nervous glance at Liam. "Liam, did you look into any of those firms I sent you?" He finally looked up, letting his eyes appear unfocused and tired. "A few, nothing yet." Robert cleared his throat, a sound like gravel turning over. "Liam, the market is what it is. You can't afford to be picky. In times like these, any port in a storm, you need to show initiative, for Chloe's sake." The implication was clear. His idleness was a stain on their daughter. "Of course, Robert, I understand," Liam said, his voice quiet, measured. Inside, he felt the cold, satisfying click of another piece of data falling into place. He was cataloging every slight, every condescending word, every look of disappointment. They were bricks, and he was building a case. The portfolio by his chair felt warm, a silent promise of the truth it held. It contained the executed sale agreement for his firm, Sterling Designs, a name Robert had just unwittingly twisted, to a global development conglomerate for a sum that would make the Vance family's fortune look like pocket money. It also contained the preliminary and highly confidential prospectus for a hostile takeover of Vance Consolidated, Robert's aging and debt-leveraged empire. He had engineered it all, a silent, intricate piece of architecture built of numbers and legal clauses. "Well, understanding is one thing, action is another," Eleanor chimed in, unable to resist another turn of the screw. "My gardener's nephew lost his job last month. He's driving for one of those rideshare companies now. He says the money isn't terrible, and at least it's something to do. It keeps the mind occupied. An idle mind is the devil's workshop, after all." The insult was so perfectly crafted, so breathtakingly dismissive, that it was almost beautiful. She had compared him, a master architect with city-defining projects to his name, to her gardener's nephew. She had suggested he become a driver to pass the time. Chloe's breath hitched. "Mom, that's not helpful." "I'm just trying to be practical, darling," Eleanor said, her eyes wide with false innocence. "We all have to support Liam through this transition, and staying busy is the first step to getting back on your feet." Liam finally laid his fork and knife down, placing them perfectly parallel on his plate. He took a slow sip of water. He looked directly at Eleanor, and for the first time that evening, his eyes were perfectly clear. A flicker of something, not anger, but a deep, unnerving calm, passed through them. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, his voice soft but resonant in the suddenly silent room. "I appreciate the suggestion. I'll certainly keep it in mind." He then picked up his utensils and resumed eating, as if she had just commented on the weather. The quiet dignity of his response was more unsettling than any outburst could have been. It was the calm at the center of a gathering storm, and Eleanor, for all her social cunning, felt a strange, unwelcome shiver of unease. She had expected him to flinch. He hadn't. He had simply absorbed the blow and filed it away. She dismissed the feeling as an anomaly. He was beaten. She was sure of it. The days that followed the disastrous dinner stretched into a week, then two. Liam perfected his performance of a man adrift. He would wake up late, wander the apartment in sweatpants, and spend hours staring at his laptop, ostensibly searching for jobs, but in reality managing the complex final stages of his company's acquisition and the strategic dismantling of Vance Consolidated. The portfolio was his constant companion. He'd sit with it on the sofa, his hand resting on the supple, aged leather, drawing a strange comfort from the weight of the secrets within. It was his anchor in a sea of his own making. Chloe's initial wave of supportive energy began to recede, eroded by the constant, grinding pressure from her mother. Their phone calls became more frequent, her tone more hushed and strained whenever she spoke to Eleanor. Liam would hear snippets from the other room. "I know, Mom, but it's only been a few weeks," followed by long, wearying silences. She was trying to defend him, but her defense grew weaker with each passing day. She was a boat caught between two opposing currents, her genuine affection for Liam and the relentless, status-obsessed tide of her family. The first major crack appeared on a Thursday afternoon. Chloe came home with two large, glossy shopping bags from a high-end department store. She found Liam on the balcony, looking out over the city skyline he had helped to shape. "I bought you something," she said, her voice attempting a cheerfulness that didn't reach her eyes. She pulled out a sleek, dark gray suit. "It's for the hospital gala next month. I figured, it would be good to have something new, for interviews and for the event." Liam turned from the railing. He looked at the suit, then at her. He knew what this was. This was not a gift, it was a uniform. A costume intended to help him blend in, to minimize the embarrassment of his unemployment at their most important social event of the year. "Chloe, this must have cost a fortune," he said, his voice flat. "Don't worry about it," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Think of it as an investment, in you, in us." The word investment hung in the air, cold and transactional. He ran his hand over the fine wool. He could have bought the entire store without noticing the charge, but he played his part. "I can't accept this." "Liam, don't be proud," she sighed, the fatigue evident in her voice. "It's just a suit. Mom and I were talking and we thought, it was a good idea, to keep your spirits up." Mom and I were talking. The phrase echoed in his mind. So, Eleanor was the architect of this gesture. It was a power play disguised as charity. They were dressing him up like a doll to make him presentable, to ensure he didn't tarnish the family image at the gala. The humiliation was a slow-acting poison. "I see," he said. He looked back at the skyline, at a soaring glass tower his firm had designed, a beacon of light and innovation. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if he were watching a play about his own life. "Thank you, Chloe. It's very thoughtful." He didn't argue. He didn't refuse again. He simply accepted, his quiet compliance more damning than any protest. He let her hang the suit in his closet, a silent testament to her waning faith and her mother's growing influence. He saw the relief on her face. She had done her duty, managed the problem. She hadn't had to fight with him, and she wouldn't have to fight with her mother. She had chosen the path of least resistance, and in doing so, she had failed a critical part of his test. Later that night, long after Chloe had fallen asleep, Liam went to his study. He closed the door and sat in the dark, the city lights painting patterns on the wall. He didn't turn on the lamp. He opened his laptop, the screen's glow illuminating his focused expression. He pulled up a secure messaging app. A new message came in from Marcus Thorne, the CEO of the global conglomerate Omnicorp. "Phase 1 complete. Financials confirmed. They are bleeding capital. The takeover bid is ready. Awaiting your signal." Liam's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He thought of the suit hanging in his closet. He thought of Chloe's relieved face. He thought of Eleanor's suggestion that he become a driver. He typed his reply, the clicks of the keys sharp and precise in the silent room. "Patience, Marcus. Not yet. There's a gala next month. I want it to be memorable." He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. He picked up the portfolio from his desk, the leather cool beneath his fingers. Inside, nestled with the acquisition papers, was a small, velvet-lined box. It had been in there for 2 months. It contained a custom-designed engagement ring, its central diamond held in a platinum setting that mimicked the soaring trusses of a bridge, his signature architectural style. A bridge between two people. He had planned to propose to Chloe on the anniversary of their first date, which was now just a few weeks away. He opened the box. The diamond caught the faint city light, scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. It was a symbol of a future he was no longer sure existed. With a slow, deliberate movement, he closed the box and placed it back in the portfolio. The test was not about vengeance. It was about truth. And the truth, he suspected, was going to be devastating. He needed to know for certain, before he either built that bridge or dismantled it for good. The quiet hum of the city was the only sound, a witness to his lonely, patient vigil. The approach of the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, the crown jewel of the Vance family's social calendar, amplified the pressure in the apartment to an almost unbearable degree. Eleanor had chaired the event for a decade, and its success was intrinsically linked to her identity. In her eyes, every detail, from the floral arrangements to the pedigrees of the guests, was a reflection of her own status. This year, Liam was a detail she could not control, a potential smudge on her otherwise immaculate canvas. Her efforts to manage him became more brazen. One afternoon, while Chloe was out, Eleanor paid a surprise visit to the apartment. She found Liam in his study, the portfolio on the desk beside him, as he stared intently at a blank sheet of paper on his drafting table. He was, in fact, mentally mapping out the final legal maneuvers for the Vance consolidated takeover. But to her, he looked like a man paralyzed by his own uselessness. "Liam, dear," she said, her voice oozing a sickly sweet concern. She glided into the room, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake. "Still no luck on the job front, I take it?" "Not yet, Eleanor," he replied without turning around. She came to stand beside the desk, her eyes flicking dismissively over his empty paper. "You know, Robert and I were discussing it. This inertia. It's not healthy, and frankly, it's not fair to Chloe. She's worried sick, even if she won't admit it to you." Liam slowly placed his pen down. He turned in his chair to face her, his expression unreadable. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting a change of scenery, a change of pace," she said, warming to her subject. "My sister has a cottage on the lake. It's quiet. You could go up there for a few weeks, clear your head, fish, chop some wood." She smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "It would give you some space to think, and it would give Chloe a chance to breathe. The gala is a very stressful time for her, for all of us. Your presence in your current state would only be a distraction." She was trying to exile him. She wanted to hide him away like a mad relative in an attic until the important guests had come and gone. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She was not just insulting him, she was actively trying to erase him from the picture. Liam held her gaze. He let the silence stretch, forcing her to stand in the space created by her own cruelty. He could see a flicker of impatience in her eyes. She was not used to being met with silence. She was used to compliance or outrage, both of which she could easily manage. This calm unnerved her. "The gala is important to Chloe," Liam said finally, his voice even. "I will be there to support her." Eleanor's smile tightened. "Of course, but perhaps you could support her from a distance? We could simply tell people you've taken on a short-term consulting project out of town. It would look so much better than, well, than the truth." "The truth?" Liam asked, his tone dangerously soft. "And what is the truth, Eleanor?" For the first time, she seemed to falter. He was supposed to be weak, defeated. He wasn't supposed to question her. He was supposed to be grateful for the elegant solution she was offering. "The truth is that you are unemployed, and it's making everyone uncomfortable," she snapped, her mask of civility finally slipping. "You walk around this beautiful apartment like a ghost. You're dragging my daughter down with your melancholy. Do you have any idea how that looks? Do you have any idea what people are saying?" He knew exactly what people were saying because she was the one saying it. He was the topic of her hushed, pitying conversations with her circle of friends. He was the cautionary tale, the man who had flown too close to the sun and had his wings of ambition melt. "I have some idea," he said, his voice still unnervingly calm. He reached over and placed his hand on the leather portfolio. The gesture was small, almost unconscious, but it was a reminder to himself of the power he held in reserve. "Nevertheless, I will be at the gala. I have my suit." The mention of the suit, the one she had orchestrated the purchase of, was a subtle counter-jab. It reminded her that he was aware of her manipulations. Her eyes narrowed. "Fine, but I am warning you, Liam. Do not make a scene. Do not embarrass my daughter. I would never dream of embarrassing Chloe, he said. The statement was perfectly true, though not in the way she understood it. The person who would be embarrassed by the end of that night was Eleanor herself. She gave a curt nod, turned on her heel, and swept out of the room. Liam listened to the click of the apartment door closing behind her. He felt no anger, only a profound, clarifying certainty. The final pieces of the puzzle were locking into place. Eleanor's cruelty, her obsession with appearances, her complete disregard for his humanity, it was all exactly as he had suspected. She was the rot at the core of the family, and her influence had seeped into everything, even, he feared, into the woman he loved. He opened the portfolio and took out the plans he was actually working on. They weren't for a building, but for a new foundation, a charitable foundation. The Liam Sterling Foundation for Urban Renewal and Architectural Innovation. The initial endowment was a 9-figure sum he had set aside from the sale of his company. The first project was to be a state-of-the-art youth center in the city's most underserved neighborhood. He had been working on the designs himself, on the blank sheets of paper Eleanor had dismissed. He was not idle. He was building a legacy, something that would last long after the Vance family's name was forgotten. This, he realized, was the true counterpoint to their shallow world. Not just the money, but the purpose. He looked at the intricate drawings, the clean lines and hopeful spaces. This was who he was. And soon, very soon, everyone would see. The gala was no longer just a deadline, it was a stage, and he had been quietly, meticulously setting the scene for the performance of a lifetime. The quiet before the storm arrived on a Wednesday evening, 2 days before the gala. It was a moment of such profound, unintentional cruelty that it would forever be etched in Liam's memory as the precise second the test ended and the consequences became inevitable. He was in the living room, reading. The apartment was dark, save for the single lamp beside his armchair, casting a pool of soft light in the otherwise enveloping twilight. He enjoyed the quiet, the feeling of the city winding down outside the vast plate glass windows. Chloe came home, dropping her keys and handbag on the console with a weary clatter. She didn't see him in the dim light. She walked directly to the kitchen, her phone already pressed to her ear. Liam remained perfectly still, a silent observer in his own home. He could hear her hushed, strained voice and the faint, tinny squawk of Eleanor's responses. "I just got home." "No, he's probably in the study, working," she said, the word working dripping with a bitter irony that twisted a knot in Liam's stomach. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I can't even talk to him anymore. It's like living with a ghost. He just sits there, with that stupid leather bag, like it's a lost puppy." Liam's hand resting on the arm of the chair clenched into a fist. That stupid leather bag. The vessel of his secret, the symbol of his patience, reduced to an object of her contempt. Every time I try to be cheerful, every time I try to help, he just gives me this quiet, blank look. "It's unnerving," Chloe continued, her voice cracking with a frustration that had clearly been building for weeks. She paced the length of the kitchen, her silhouette a restless shadow against the gleaming stainless steel appliances. "He's coming to the gala, he insists. It's going to be a nightmare. Everyone will be asking questions. I'll have to spend the whole night smiling and pretending everything is fine." There was a pause. Liam could imagine Eleanor on the other end, pouring poison into her daughter's ear, validating her frustrations, stoking the fires of her resentment. Then came the words, the quiet bomb that shattered the last of his hope. "I know, Mom. I know," Chloe whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You're right. He's bringing me down. All this negativity, this failure, it's dragging me down with him. I don't know how much more of this I can take." "He's bringing me down." The words didn't thunder. They landed with the soft, devastating finality of a feather settling on the trigger of a landmine. All the slights from Eleanor, all the condescension from Robert, They were surface wounds. This was a blow to the heart. This was from Chloe, the woman he had planned to build a life with, the woman for whom he had designed a bridge of platinum and diamonds. In her moment of truth, when speaking to the person whose opinion she valued most, she had not defended him. She had not affirmed her love. She had seen him as a burden, a weight, a source of negativity. She had seen him exactly as her mother did. Liam did not move. He did not breathe. He sat in the encroaching darkness and let the pain wash over him, cold and clarifying. The test was over. He had his answer. The foundation of their love was not bedrock. It was dust. He heard her end the call with a sigh. "Okay, Mom, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Love you." She turned on the kitchen light, and the sudden brightness made her blink. Her eyes scanned the living room and finally found him, a still figure in the armchair. She jumped, a hand flying to her chest. "Liam! Oh my God, you scared me. I didn't see you there. How long have you been sitting there?" Her face was a flurry of emotions, shock, then guilt, then a defensive anger. Liam slowly rose from the chair. He looked at her, and his face was a mask of calm, but his eyes were like chips of ice. He had been playing the part of a broken man for weeks. Now, for the first time, he felt a sliver of genuine, soul-crushing loss. "Long enough," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. Her face paled. What did you hear?" "I heard everything, Chloe," he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet statement held more weight than any accusation. He walked past her, towards the study, without another word. He didn't grab the portfolio. He didn't need its comfort anymore. The truth was its own cold anchor now. He closed the study door behind him, leaving her standing alone in the bright, sterile kitchen. He did not work. He did not make any calls. He simply stood at the window, looking out at the city he loved, a city of steel and glass and concrete, a city built on solid foundations. He thought about the flimsy, rotten structure of the life he had almost built with Chloe. He had needed to test it, and it had failed. It had collapsed at the first sign of pressure. The sadness was a deep, physical ache. But beneath it, something else was beginning to form. A hard, resolute core of purpose. The gala was in 2 days. He would go. He would wear the suit they bought him. He would play his part to the very end. But the finale would not be the one they were expecting. He was no longer just running a test. He was now a force of nature. A correction. He was the storm that had been so patiently gathering, and he was about to make landfall. The night of the gala arrived, wrapped in an atmosphere of crystalline tension. The event was held at the Atrium, a soaring, glass-enclosed venue that was the flagship property of Vance Consolidated's hospitality division. It was a space designed to project power and success, and tonight it was Eleanor's stage. She moved through the throng of guests like a queen in her court, her silver gown shimmering, her smile bright and brittle. Robert was by her side, projecting an aura of benevolent authority, shaking hands and accepting accolades for his family's manufactured generosity. Chloe was a vision in emerald green, but her beauty was marred by a visible anxiety. Her eyes constantly darted towards a grand entrance, searching for Liam. After their conversation, or lack thereof, 2 nights ago, a chasm of silence had opened between them. He had been polite, distant, and utterly unreadable. She didn't know what he was thinking, and for the first time, that terrified her. She had tried to apologize, to explain. "I was just stressed, Liam. I didn't mean it like that." But her words had evaporated against the wall of his calm. He had simply nodded and said, "I understand." And his understanding felt more like a judgment than a comfort. Liam arrived late, as he had planned. He bypassed the red carpet and the clamoring photographers, entering through a side door. He wore the suit Chloe had bought him. It fit perfectly, a cage of fine wool he had willingly stepped into. But the man inside the suit was not the one they expected. The slump was gone from his shoulders. The vacant look was gone from his eyes. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that drew surprised looks from those who had been primed to see a broken man. In his hand, he carried the worn leather portfolio. He saw the Vance family holding court near the main stage. He watched them for a moment, an architect studying a structure for its weaknesses. He saw Eleanor laugh, a sharp, metallic sound. He saw Robert clap a city councilman on the back. He saw Chloe twisting a ring on her finger, her smile a fragile, painted thing. He began to move through the crowd, not towards them, but along the periphery. He nodded politely to the few people he knew, his expression neutral. The whispers followed him like a ripple in water. "Is that him? Chloe Vance's fiancé? I heard he lost everything." "He looks better than I expected." Still, how awkward. Finally, Robert spotted him. He excused himself and cut a path through the crowd, his expression one of paternal annoyance. He steered Liam towards a secluded alcove behind a large floral display. "Liam," Robert began, his voice a low growl, "what do you think you're doing?" "I'm attending a gala, Robert. I was invited," Liam said calmly. "Don't play games with me. You know what I mean. Your presence here is a liability. You're making Chloe uncomfortable. You're making everyone uncomfortable. People are talking." "Let them talk," Liam said. Robert's face flushed with anger. "Listen to me, and listen closely. I have put up with this situation for my daughter's sake, but my patience is at an end. You are an embarrassment. I want you to turn around, walk out that door, and don't come back. We'll make an excuse. We'll say you were called away on urgent business." Robert chuckled mirthlessly. "God knows you could use some." This was it, the final push. The moment he had been waiting for. Liam looked at the older man, at his arrogant, florid face, and felt nothing but a cold, clear sense of purpose. "No," Liam said. The word was quiet, but it had the density of a stone. "What did you say?" Robert sputtered, taken aback. "I said no. I'm not leaving," Liam repeated. "In fact, I believe I'm scheduled to speak." Before Robert could process this absurdity, the master of ceremonies was on stage, his voice booming through the sound system. "And now it is my great honor to welcome the chairwoman of this event for the 10th consecutive year, the woman whose tireless dedication makes all of this possible, Mrs. Eleanor Vance." A wave of applause swept through the room. Eleanor glided onto the stage, beaming. She began her speech, a well-rehearsed cascade of thank yous and platitudes about community and charity. Midway through, she paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "In times of prosperity, it is easy to give," she said, her voice dropping into a more somber, sanctimonious tone. "But true character is revealed in times of hardship. It is about resilience. It is about picking oneself up after a fall and having the dignity to carry on, even when fortune has turned its back on you." Her eyes found Liam in the alcove, a pointed, pitying look that was not lost on the guests sitting nearby. It was her final, public humiliation of him. She finished her speech to thunderous applause. As she turned to leave the stage, Liam stepped out from the alcove. He walked calmly, purposefully, towards the small set of stairs leading up to the stage. Security personnel, seeing his confident stride, assumed he belonged there. Robert stood frozen, his mouth agape. Chloe watched, her hand flying to her throat, a sudden, sickening dread washing over her. Liam reached the podium just as a surprised Eleanor was stepping away. He took the microphone. A hush fell over the room. All eyes were on him. The unemployed fiancé, the ghost at the feast. He placed his leather portfolio on the lectern with a soft, definitive thud. "Thank you, Eleanor," he began, his voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the vast hall. "That was a beautiful speech, especially your thoughts on hardship and dignity." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He looked out at the sea of confused, curious faces. "My name is Liam Sterling, and for the last month, many of you have heard that I have been facing a certain hardship." He looked directly at Eleanor and Robert, who were standing at the side of the stage, paralyzed with shock and fury. He looked at Chloe, whose face was ashen. "I'm here to talk about the truth," he said, "the truth that Mrs. Vance so values." The revelation began not with a bang, but with the quiet, deliberate unlatching of his leather portfolio. The sound, amplified by the microphone, seemed to echo in the cavernous, silent room. Liam opened the cover, revealing the neat stacks of documents within. The audience watched, utterly captivated by the bizarre, unfolding drama. This was far more interesting than any charity auction. "For the past month," Liam said, his voice a steady, resonant baritone that commanded the attention of every person in the atrium, "I have been engaged in a personal project, a test, you might say. I wanted to understand what people truly value." He let his gaze drift over the front rows, filled with the city's elite, before settling it back on the Vance family. "I told my fiancée, Chloe, and by extension her family, that I had lost my job, that my architectural firm had downsized my department." He paused. This was a lie. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Chloe looked as if she had been struck. Her mother, Eleanor, took an involuntary step forward, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "I did not lose my job," Liam continued, his tone remaining implacably calm. He lifted a thick, bound document from the portfolio. "Because it was impossible for me to be fired from a company I owned. I didn't have a department. I had a firm, Sterling Designs." He held up the document so the large logo on the cover was visible to the front rows. "Some of you may be familiar with our work. The Meridian Tower, the Riverside Arts Complex, the new pediatric wing of this very hospital." Another murmur went through the crowd, this one of recognition and confusion. Sterling Designs was one of the most innovative and successful architectural firms in the country. The idea that this quiet, unassuming man was its principal was difficult to reconcile with the narrative the Vances had so carefully crafted. "The truth is, I haven't been idle or looking for work. I've been finalizing the single largest transaction of my life." He swapped the document for another one, this one with a different, more globally recognized logo. "3 weeks ago, I finalized the sale of Sterling Designs to Omnicorp Global Development." The name Omnicorp landed like a physical blow. They were giants, titans of industry whose net worth was a matter of public record and astronomical speculation. "Mr. Vance," Liam said, turning his head slightly to address Robert, who stood as if turned to stone. "You once advised me that in this market, one can't be picky. I took your advice to heart." He looked back at the audience. The sale price was $950 million. Silence. A profound, ringing, absolute silence. The number was so immense, so far beyond the realm of comprehension for most people in the room, that it seemed to suck the very air out of the space. $950 million. Eleanor's face, which had been flushed with anger, was now a ghastly, bloodless white. She understood numbers. She understood that this single transaction made Liam Sterling one of the wealthiest men in the state, if not the country. Wealthier by an order of magnitude than her own family. The pity, the condescension, the casual cruelty she had shown him for weeks, all of it now seemed like a grotesque, idiotic farce. "But that," Liam said, his voice dropping slightly, drawing the audience in even closer, "was only phase one of my new venture." Suddenly a man stood up from a table near the front. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with an air of quiet authority. It was Marcus Thorne, the legendary CEO of Omnicorp, a man whose picture was frequently in the financial press. He began walking toward the stage. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Liam said into the microphone. Marcus joined him on stage, shaking his hand firmly. He took the microphone Liam offered him. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Thorne. I can confirm everything Mr. Sterling has just said. The acquisition of his firm was a landmark deal for us. His genius is undeniable." He then turned to face Robert Vance directly. "And as the new majority shareholder of Omnicorp, Mr. Sterling and I have been pursuing other opportunities. We are always looking for undervalued assets with potential for restructuring." Thorne's gaze was cold as a banker's heart. "As of 4 p.m. this afternoon," he announced, "Omnicorp completed a successful hostile takeover of Vance Consolidated." This was the true explosion. The first revelation had been about personal wealth. This was about the destruction of an empire. Vance Consolidated was Robert's identity, his life's work, the source of all the family's power and prestige. And it was gone, snatched away from him in a silent, bloodless boardroom coup orchestrated by the very man he had called an embarrassment just minutes earlier. Robert staggered back, his hand clutching his chest. He looked at Liam, his eyes wide with the horror of a man watching his entire world burn down around him. Liam took the microphone back from Marcus. His work was not yet done. This was not just about business. It was personal. He looked at Chloe. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as she stared at him, at this stranger on the stage who wore her fiancé's face. "Eleanor," Liam said, his voice softening but losing none of its power, "you warned me not to embarrass your daughter, and I promised I wouldn't. This isn't about embarrassing her. It's about truth." He began to list his grievances, not with anger, but with the calm precision of an auditor reading a report. "You suggested I become a rideshare driver. You tried to exile me to a lake house so I wouldn't be a distraction at your party. You stood on this very stage and used my supposed failure as a prop for your speech on dignity." He turned his attention to Chloe, and his voice was filled with a profound, aching sadness. "And you, Chloe, you told your mother I was bringing you down, that my failure was a weight you couldn't bear." He had made the private public. He had held up the moral mirror, and the reflection was hideous. The Vances, stripped of their power and their secrets, stood exposed for all to see, petty, cruel, and shallow. Liam looked out at the stunned faces of the city's elite, his jury. "I didn't do this for revenge," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "I did it because I needed to know. I needed to know if the woman I loved me, the man, or if she loved my success. I needed to know if her family's respect was earned by character, or if it was simply rented to the highest bidder." He paused, letting the weight of his final question settle over the room. "Now," he said, his gaze finding Chloe's once more, "I know." He gave a slight, formal nod to the audience, turned, and walked off the stage, leaving a dynasty in ruins behind him. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of chaos conducted in hushed tones. The gala, Eleanor's crowning achievement, disintegrated. Guests, uncertain of the social protocol for witnessing the public execution of a dynasty, began to quietly slip away, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and a delicious, barely concealed schadenfreude. The story was already spreading, transmitted in urgent whispers and frantic text messages. By morning, it would be the only thing anyone in their circle talked about. Liam, accompanied by Marcus Thorne, did not linger. They walked through the stunned crowd, a path parting before them as if by magic. No one dared to meet Liam's eye. He was no longer the pitiable fiancé. He was a figure of immense, terrifying power. They exited through the same side door he had entered, stepping out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage behind. Inside, the Vance family stood marooned on an island of their own making. Robert had collapsed into a chair at a now empty table, his face gray, his breathing ragged. He was staring at the stage, at the empty podium, as if he could still see Liam standing there, calmly dismantling his life. He had built his world on the simple, brutal calculus of power and money, and he had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and financially obliterated by a man he had dismissed as a worthless boy. Eleanor was the first to move. Her survival instincts, honed over a lifetime of social warfare, kicked in. The initial shock gave way to a frantic, desperate need to control the damage. She saw Liam's retreating back and started after him, her silver gown rustling. "Liam, wait!" she called out, her voice stripped of its earlier authority, now thin and pleading. He stopped just before the door but didn't turn around. She reached him, her hand tentatively touching his arm. The arm of the suit she had bought for him. "Liam, please, we need to talk. There has been a misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible misunderstanding." Liam slowly turned to face her. His expression was not angry, it was worse. It was empty. He looked at her as if she were a stranger he'd passed on the street. "No, Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet but final. "For the first time, everything is perfectly understood." Her face crumpled. The mask of the powerful matriarch fell away, revealing a frightened, desperate woman. "What you did, what you said in there, Robert, the company, you can't. We can fix this. We can put out a statement. A merger. We can call it a merger." It was pathetic. She was still trying to spin the narrative, to paste over the gaping chasm of their ruin with pretty words. "The time for statements is over," Liam said. He gently removed her hand from his arm. "You should go see to your husband." He turned and walked out, leaving her standing there, her hand hovering in the empty air. The finality of his dismissal was more brutal than any insult. He had not engaged. He had not argued. He had simply erased her. The focus of the room, of the few remaining family friends and bewildered staff, now shifted to Chloe. She had remained near the stage, frozen, as if rooted to the spot. The emerald of her dress seemed to mock the sallow, sickly pallor of her skin. She watched her mother's failed appeal, watched the door close behind the man she was supposed to marry, the man who was now a complete and utter stranger to her. Finally, her legs began to work. She walked, almost in a trance, towards her father. She knelt by his chair. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you okay?" Robert didn't seem to hear her. He was mumbling to himself. Everything, all of it, gone. He took it all. Chloe looked from her father's broken form to her mother, who was now walking back from the door, her face a mask of cold fury and terror. The foundation of her world, the money, the status, the power that she had been raised to believe was as permanent and dependable as the sunrise, had been revealed as a fragile illusion, shattered in a single evening. And at the center of it all was Liam, the quiet, gentle, artistic man she thought she knew. She had pitied him. She had been embarrassed by him. She had complained that he was bringing her down. The shame of that statement now burned in her gut like acid. He hadn't been drowning. He had been standing on the shore, watching her, testing to see if she would throw him a rope or let him sink. And she had let him sink. She stood up, a desperate resolve forming in her mind. She had to talk to him. She had to explain. She ran from the venue, her heels clattering on the marble floor. She burst out into the night, looking frantically up and down the street. She saw a sleek black car pulling away from the curb. She knew, somehow, it was his. "Liam!" she screamed, running into the street after the car. "Liam, wait! Please!" The car did not slow down. It merged smoothly into the flow of traffic and disappeared into the glittering, indifferent city. Chloe stood alone in the middle of the road, the sound of her own desperate cry echoing in her ears, the taillights of her future disappearing into the darkness. She had been weighed, she had been measured, and she had been found wanting. The bill for her lack of faith had just come due, and the price was everything. The days following the gala were a slow, public unraveling. The Vance family's downfall was swift and merciless, chronicled with glee by the same society pages and financial journals that had once celebrated their ascent. The Omnicorp takeover of Vance Consolidated was clinical. Robert was unceremoniously forced into a retirement he hadn't planned for another 20 years. The board was dissolved, the company's assets absorbed or liquidated. The name Vance, which had once been a hallmark of corporate stability, became a synonym for hubris and collapse. Their social standing evaporated overnight. Invitations dried up. Phone calls went unreturned. The friends who had flocked to their parties and sought their favor now crossed the street to avoid them. Eleanor, who had once ruled her social circle with an iron fist, found herself utterly alone, a queen without a kingdom. The most painful cuts came from the very people she had once looked down upon, who now looked at her with the same pity she had once reserved for Liam. Within a month, the financial reality of their new circumstances forced them to sell the palatial family home. The cavernous dining room, the site of Liam's first major humiliation, was dismantled by an auction house, its contents sold off piece by piece. They moved into a modest townhouse, a place that, while comfortable by any normal standard, felt like a prison to a woman who had once commanded an empire. Chloe bore the brunt of a different kind of fallout. She was caught between the wreckage of her family and the ghost of the man she had lost. She broke off the engagement formally via a stiff, lawyer-approved letter to which Liam did not reply. She was seen as a tragic figure by some, a foolish one by others. Her friends tried to be supportive, but their words were hollow. They would tell her she had dodged a bullet, that Liam's actions were cruel and manipulative. But Chloe knew the truth. Liam had not been cruel. He had been honest. He had held up a mirror, and she had not liked the reflection. She was forced to confront the person she had become, someone so defined by her mother's values that she had failed the one person who had offered her a genuine, unconditional love. The words, "He's bringing me down," haunted her waking moments and her dreams. She realized with a sickening clarity that she had been the one who was bringing him down, stifling his true self with her family's petty expectations. One afternoon, she found her mother in the sterile, unfamiliar living room of their new home, staring blankly at a wall where a priceless painting used to hang. "We have to talk to him," Chloe said, her voice quiet but firm. Eleanor turned, her eyes hollow. "There's nothing to say. He's won." "This isn't about winning or losing," Chloe insisted. "It's about atonement. I need to apologize to him. You need to apologize to him." Eleanor let out a short, bitter laugh. "Apologize? For what? For being concerned about my daughter's future? For trying to protect our family? He's the one who was deceitful. He lied to us for weeks." Chloe looked at her mother and felt a profound sense of pity. Even now, stripped of everything, Eleanor could not see her own fault. She was still trying to frame her cruelty as concern, her snobbery as prudence. "He didn't lie about who he was, Mom," Chloe said, a sad wisdom in her voice. "He lied about his circumstances. We were the ones who were fake. We claimed to value character, but the moment his perceived value dropped, we treated him like garbage. Don't you see? The test wasn't about his money, it was about our character, and we failed." Eleanor turned away, unwilling or unable to accept the truth. "Your father is a broken man because of him. Dad is a broken man because he built his life on a foundation of arrogance and underestimated his competition," Chloe corrected gently. "Liam just exposed the cracks that were already there." This conversation was the turning point for Chloe. She realized she could either remain in the ruins with her parents, clinging to a bitter, self-justifying narrative, or she could try to build something new from the wreckage of her own mistakes. She knew she could never get Liam back. The trust between them was irrevocably shattered. But she could, perhaps, reclaim a piece of her own integrity. She spent the next few days making a decision. She packed a bag, wrote her parents a letter explaining that she needed to find her own way, and left the townhouse. She got a small apartment on the other side of the city and found a job working at a non-profit art gallery, a job that paid little but gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer Chloe Vance, the heiress. She was just Chloe, a young woman trying to figure out who she was without the scaffolding of wealth and status. Weeks turned into 2 months. She had not heard from Liam, nor had she tried to contact him again. But she knew she had one last thing to do. She needed to face him, not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer an apology, honestly and without expectation. It was the only way she could truly close that chapter of her life and begin her own. She picked up the phone and called the main number for the Liam Sterling Foundation, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and resolve. She left a message, simply stating her name and that she would like to request a brief meeting. She didn't expect a reply, but the next day, her phone rang. It was his assistant. Mr. Sterling would see her. The offices of the Liam Sterling Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of the Meridian Tower, the very building Liam had pointed out from his balcony all those months ago. The space was the physical embodiment of his design philosophy. Clean lines, natural light, a sense of soaring, open possibility. There was no ostentatious display of wealth, only the quiet confidence of good taste and purpose. Glass walls looked out over the city, a constant reminder of the community the foundation sought to serve. Chloe felt small and out of place as the elevator ascended in silence. She wore a simple dress, a far cry from the designer labels she used to favor. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times, but now her mind was a blank slate of anxiety. The elevator doors opened directly into a minimalist reception area. A young professional assistant greeted her with a polite smile and led her down a bright hallway to a corner office. The door was open. Liam was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her, looking out at the urban landscape. He wore a simple, well-fitting charcoal sweater and dark trousers. He looked relaxed, confident, at peace. "Mr. Sterling will be right with you," the assistant said, gesturing for her to take a seat in one of the 2 chairs facing a large, uncluttered desk. Chloe sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the city far below. After a moment that felt like an eternity, Liam turned from the window. He looked at her, and his expression was not cold or angry, but neutral, like a doctor observing a patient. "Chloe," he said, his voice calm, "thank you for coming." He walked around the desk but did not sit behind it. Instead, he took the other chair, so they were sitting opposite each other, equals. It was a gesture of respect that she felt she hadn't earned, and it almost broke her composure. "Thank you for seeing me," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I know you're incredibly busy." "I can make time," he said. He waited, letting her guide the conversation. He was giving her the floor, the same way he had at the disastrous family dinner, but this time the context was entirely different. She took a deep breath. "Liam, I came here to apologize. For everything. Not to make excuses because there are none, but just to say it. To you." She looked him in the eye, forcing herself not to look away. "What I said on the phone to my mother, it was unforgivable. It was weak, and it was cruel, and it was a reflection of the worst parts of myself. The parts of me that were more concerned with appearances and what people thought than with your feelings, with your well-being, with our love." Tears began to well in her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was not about eliciting his pity. It was about taking responsibility. "You spent weeks being subjected to these awful, condescending remarks from my family, and I just stood by and let it happen. I was a coward. I was so afraid of their disapproval that I failed to stand up for the person I was supposed to love more than anyone. I failed you, and I failed myself." Liam listened, his expression unchanged. He was absorbing her words, analyzing them, just as he had absorbed and analyzed her family's insults. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued, her voice gaining a little strength. "And I'm not here to ask for you back. I know I destroyed that. I needed you to hear it from me, that I know what I did. I see it, and I see who I was. And I am so, so sorry." She finished, the words hanging in the sunlit office. She had said what she came to say. The ball was in his court. She braced herself for anger, for dismissal, for a cold lecture on her failings. Instead, after a long moment of silence, Liam gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "I believe you," he said. The simplicity of his response was disarming. "When I started this," he explained, his voice taking on a reflective, almost pedagogical tone, "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to protect myself. I had to know if the life we were planning to build had a solid foundation. An architect is obsessed with foundations, Chloe. If the ground isn't stable, it doesn't matter how beautiful the building is. It will eventually collapse." He gestured vaguely toward the city outside the window. "Our world, your family's world, it's built on sand, on shifting perceptions of status and wealth. I saw how it was affecting you, how it was shaping your values. I needed to introduce a stress test, a simulated earthquake, to see if what we had was real enough to withstand the shaking." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense but not unkind. "It wasn't. It crumbled at the first tremor. Your mother's reaction was predictable. Your father's too. They are who they are. But yours was the one that mattered. And you chose them. You chose the appearance of strength over the reality of love." His words were devastatingly accurate, but they were delivered without malice. It was a diagnosis, not an accusation. "I am moving on, Chloe," he said, settling back in his chair. "This foundation," he gestured around the office, "is dedicated to building things that last. Community centers, scholarships, affordable housing. Things built on the bedrock of purpose, not profit. That's my future." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of the old warmth in his eyes, a deep, sad warmth. "I hope you can find a way to build a new foundation for yourself, one that is truly your own, not one inherited from your parents." He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "I do forgive you, Chloe. I forgive you because holding on to that anger is a weight I don't care to carry. But forgiving is not the same as forgetting. The trust is gone, and without trust, there can be no bridge between us." He offered her his hand. She stood on shaky legs and took it. His grip was firm and warm. It was the hand of the man she had loved, the hand she had let go of. "Goodbye, Liam," she whispered. "Goodbye, Chloe," he replied. "I wish you well." She walked out of his office, through the bright hallway, and into the waiting elevator. As the doors closed, she finally let the tears fall. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of catharsis. It was over. He had given her not the reconciliation she might have secretly craved, but something far more valuable, closure, and a blueprint for her own redemption. Liam watched the elevator doors close. He walked back to the window and looked down at the city below. He felt a sense of melancholy, the quiet ache that follows a necessary amputation. He had loved Chloe, or at least the idea of her. He had wanted her to pass the test, to rise to the occasion and prove his doubts wrong. But she hadn't, and that was a truth he had to accept. His actions at the gala had been born of profound hurt, but they had also been a necessary act of creation, the creation of his own future, free from the toxic values of the Vance family. He had not sought to destroy them for the sake of vengeance, but to clear the ground for something better to be built. His justice had been poetic, not petty. Robert, who valued only the bottom line, had been undone by a bigger bottom line. Eleanor, who valued only social status, had become a pariah. And Chloe, who had feared being brought down, was now forced to find her own way up from the bottom. He thought of the engagement ring, still in its box, now tucked away in a safe. It was a beautiful object, a symbol of a future that would never be. Perhaps one day he would dismantle it, use the materials for something new. That's what an architect does. He salvages what is good from a failed structure and uses it to build again, stronger and wiser than before. His assistant buzzed him on the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, the board from the Southside Youth Center project is here." "Send them in," Liam said, turning from the window. A group of energetic, hopeful people entered his office, carrying blueprints and mock-ups. They were community leaders, social workers, and teachers. Their world was miles away from the Vances' glittering galas, but it was infinitely more real. Liam smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "All right," he said, rolling up his sleeves as he walked toward the large conference table. "Let's build something." He had faced the storm, and he had emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but whole. He had learned that true wealth is not measured in dollars or social standing, but in integrity. True strength is not the power to dominate others, but the quiet, patient courage to be true to oneself, no matter the cost. And true love cannot survive on a weak foundation. It must be built on the unshakable bedrock of mutual respect and unwavering faith. He had lost a fiancée, but he had found himself. And as he looked at the hopeful faces around the table, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. So, what do you think? Was Liam justified in his elaborate test, or did he go too far? It's a tough question, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in his shoes, or in Chloe's? Your perspective is what makes this community so special. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you found this story compelling, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories that make you think and feel. We appreciate every single one of you, and we can't wait to see you in the next one.